for what we do, which is sort of like a studio style of something at scale, I think we're probably the only real player that does this at this scale, at the studio level, where we actually build out tens of millions of dollars worth of resources that we give the entrepreneur access to, where we give them a lot more capital than you would at, say, like an accelerator.
So welcome to Leaders on a Mission, where I have the great pleasure, really, of speaking with bold thinkers and innovators, transforming industries and tackling global challenges. And today, it's a real thrill to have Sean O'Sullivan, founder and managing partner of SOSV, join us today. Now, SOSV have become a global force in venture capital, investing in, I think, over 1,000 startups with world-renowned accelerators like HAX and IndieBio, with a strong focus on, I suppose, sustainability, climate tech, deep tech investors. And in this conversation with Sean has not had a linear career, fascinating journey and career. And we're going to really kind of dive into that and chat all things innovation and navigating what it's like, I suppose, to navigate today's venture landscape. So whether you're an entrepreneur, investor, or just passionate about the future of innovation, this is a conversation for you. So Sean, thanks so much for coming on today. My
great pleasure. Thank you for that very loquacious introduction there.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. So, you know what, just thinking from you, if I was to take you back, right, to a 16-year-old Sean O'Sullivan.
Yeah.
Maybe it was 16 to 18, called it, right?
Yeah.
What kind of ideas did you have about your kind of future and career at that point?
Well, I think you probably would have to go back a little earlier, but at 16, I just graduated high school and I was going to college at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. But, up to, even at that stage when I was just going to college, I had a lot of uncertainty. I grew up in poverty. Our family was on the welfare system for 6 or 7 years growing up. I was the eighth of 9 children with a single mom. Same dad, but he abandoned the family when I was quite young, when I was 3. So it was a tough, hard scrabble existence. And just at that time, it's just like, how can I get out of the cold? How can I make sure I get fed? Those are survival sort of things. I grew up in the upstate New York region, which is sort of, known for its cold and its snow and its wet, but it's a beautiful area actually. But if you're poor, that means and you have to, chop the trees down and chop up firewood and things like that to keep the fires going, and surviving through the nights in a uninsulated house, with you put a bottle of water, not a bottle of water, just a glass of water next to your table at night. It would be frozen in the morning. So it's a hard scrabble existence. So in the winter time, right? So just survival and getting out of that system and just try to provide a income for myself and making sure my mom was taken care of and all of that. That was one of the first priorities for me at 16 to 18. And so I looked at the various fields. I'd always wanted to be like an author, but it didn't seem like that was reliable enough. And so I really liked engineering. I like creating things. So I went to engineering school. Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, also in upstate New York, the oldest English-speaking engineering school in the continuously running in the world, actually.
Got it.
Yeah.
But even when you went to the engineering school, after the thoughts around kind of an author, did you always have an innovative, entrepreneurial kind of streak, or was that developed later?
Yeah, no, actually, I was good with math. So I figured out early that if I worked for a wage, I would never have the sort of financial security I was looking for. And so I said, okay, I have to start a company at some point or be involved in creating something in order to give myself, get away from that, I'm not a heavy guy or anything. I'm pretty fit, but I weighed like 70 pounds lighter at the same height. I was 110 pounds or something when I graduated high school at 5'11", right? So you're probably thinking kilograms. So it means nothing to you, but it would have been pretty thin. I was bone thin. And so like just actually surviving was actually a big deal. So like figuring out how to get a regular income, I thought I could do better at doing that. I loved architecture as well, at that age, but I said, okay, the real thing to do is do something in these hot upcoming fields: electrical engineering, computer science.
Got it. No, I got the sense looking at some of your interests and even some of your education, right? You could have probably done many things, actually, providing it had a creative, innovative kind of spark around it, right? I mean, I'm sure many directions you could have gone in.
I'm actually reasonably good at a lot of things. The inch deep, mile wide sort of good, not necessarily. I also have this sort of ADD tendency. I just be out there and open about it. I hop on topic to topic, and that enables me to think in a different way than perhaps others do. But I do get super hyper focused on trying to deliver, and as my mom would say, finish what you start. So I've always tried to create lasting value out of whatever it is that I'm doing. But I have a wide interest scope. So theoretically, I could have been a musician. Theoretically, I could have been an author. Theoretically, I don't think I would have been an astrophysicist or anything like that. There's lots of things I couldn't have done, I ended up being a venture capitalist simply because I love working with the startups at the startup phase and helping them create a great foundation for their ongoing path, and then created the systems and tools around it to make it highly scalable so that we could affect entire industries, which SOSV does. Actually, we've helped launch several major industries that are producing billions and billions, tens of billions in revenue. And even more, some new industries that we've helped create. And I've helped create. So, as you know, I coined the term. As you probably know, I coined the term cloud computing. That's a big field. I did street maps on computers. That's a big area. I was the original inventor and original patent holder for ride sharing, like what Uber does and Lyft and all those guys. So, like I sort of sometimes I'm too early in a field, but I have a lot of different interests. Yeah.
Well, I noticed you were doing that stuff with the mapping tech. It looked like in the mid-90s.
Yeah, in the mid-80s actually, and so it got we were the ones that popularized street mapping on computers. So if you ever type an address on a computer and see a map, whether it's on your phone or in an Uber app or whatever else, or on your desktop, we invented that technology and made it possible and fast and brought maps all across the world throughout not just the U.S. but China and all other places. A lot of that was based on the actual people at MapInfo or our value-added resellers and other people that we teamed up with.
Now, tell me, when did IndieBio, what year did you start IndieBio?
IndieBio was started in 2014. Its first name was SynBio Accelerator, which is a terrible name. And then the subsequent year, we called it IndieBio. It was originally started in Europe. It was originally started in Cork, Ireland. And then we launched the San Francisco branch, which was, the Ireland branch actually launched some pretty notable companies, like, Perfect Day, for example, is one of the companies that launched out a unicorn company. But the IndieBio San Francisco brand is probably the more famous of the locations because it spun up a whole industry and was right in Silicon Valley. Tons of companies got funded. There's tens of billions of dollars that have been created in the market caps of the companies that have come out of IndieBio, both in San Francisco originally about 10 years ago, and for the last 5 years in IndieBio New York. We'll be celebrating the 5th anniversary of IndieBio New York next year.
Oh, congratulations. And so just two quick questions. Like, I think, first of all, when I think about IndieBio and I think about, I suppose, synthetic biology in the future, tell us a little bit about that, because if you're in cloud computing, right, or you're in computing, you're in kind of computer science. So tell us about that kind of, like for you, yeah, the kind of biology kind of explosion or betting on the future of biology, as it were.
Well, I mean, ultimately, all of us at some point, when you've taken care of the basic needs, like getting fed and, having a loved one and, having a house, shelter and all these sort of Maslow's priorities needs or pyramid of needs or whatever it is, you start thinking about, okay, what kind of impact you have on the world beyond that, And I think having climbed my first mountain with the IPO of my first company when I was 28, I left that company and then did some other things right after. So I was like really searching for meaning. I'm rereading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning right now.
Oh yeah.
And so and that desire for actually having an impactful life and having a meaning and a purpose is, I think, something that drives all of us, even when we have our daily needs, right? It's something that we want to have more than just our daily, lives fulfilled with whatever the daily activities are. We actually want to have some lasting purpose. And so when I thought about the things that were the most impactful to both my life and the lives of everyone else I know, biology is a critical area, and climate change is another area. All the physical world technologies that software by itself isn't sufficient in managing. I mean, you can always do e-commerce marketplaces and social media networks and AI, but at the end, you have to affect the atoms, not just the bits. And so our focus with IndieBio and HAX is working on those physical world means, because those are the ways that you're going to change these challenges for humanity. Like in particular, my mom died of Alzheimer's. I have a son with autism. I have a sister 2 years ago who died of cancer. These are actually all solvable problems, and biology is capable of creating these problems like COVID or whatever, but also solving these problems. And we can see how immensely powerful engineering and science can be at improving the quality of life. And in particular in that physical world. So that's why IndieBio is important to me, because we have these solvable problems. We're not solving them. We're not solving them quickly enough. And so let's empower more entrepreneurs who are sort of left out of the system. Maybe they're a postdoc, or maybe they're but they have no access to capital, and and maybe they don't come from, the greatest lab at Harvard or Stanford or whatever. So they but if they have the greatest ideas in the world, then we are the ones that are going to try to find those teams and back them. So it's important to me, I think. And then the other area in terms of climate, in terms of HAX, HAX started really more because I was an electrical engineer and I had designed computer systems and small computers and smartphones and things like that before. And so I was looking to actually, take all the hard-earned lessons, terribly painful lessons I've learned in trying to build hardware and make them more scalable, more affordable. And we sort of stumbled on into a whole. I had a lot of operations in China 15 years ago. And so we stumbled on into the Shenzhen ecosystem and helping get people have access to that. Now we've moved our headquarters since then to Newark, New Jersey, which is where I am today at our HAX facility today.
Okay, no, awesome. Thanks for that. And the other thing I wanted to have a chat through, because I remember telling you when I first visited IndieBio 2016, I was kind of a little bit blown away by what I saw. It looked really kind of unique in terms of the whole philosophy and the whole kind of engagement with this entrepreneur. What did you see, I suppose, in the traditional venture ecosystem? How did you come up with that? And, just talk to me a little bit about that, because I think you kind of create the playbook around this, right?
For what we do, which is sort of like a studio style of something at scale, I think we're probably the only real player that does this at this scale, at the studio level, where we actually build out tens of millions of dollars worth of resources that we give the entrepreneur access to, where we give them a lot more capital than you would at, say, like an accelerator, and where we also have, we have 15, 18 PhDs in our organization of 80 people. So we have real deep technical expertise that we can help the founder solve problems with. And of course, we have this body of knowledge that comes with having invested in, over 1,000 companies since the start. There's only about 900 of those companies that are still active and alive. So, but several of those companies have sold on and gone on, and several have failed, obviously, as well. And we're not actually aiming to be the world's most active investor. Some quarters we are listed as the world's most active investor, period, across all of the industry. But we're only actually about 2 to 3% of the seed market in the United States are companies that come out of HAX and IndieBio in terms of the number of dollars that are put into our companies. And it's similar at the Series A stage. About 3 or 4% of the money that goes into startups in the United States goes into HAX or IndieBio companies. So it's a small fraction of the entire industry, but it's very concentrated on the things that we do, which does make us the most active in these areas. I don't think I've answered your question, though. You were saying, IndieBio, very unique, and what were the roots of it? I guess there were models that I looked to before, and so one would have been Bill Gross's from Pasadena, Idea Lab. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. That was sort of the precursor, and it was that was a studio style program. It's constructed differently, but very much a studio style program, and really the precursor to all accelerators in a way. Although it was run very differently because it was more Bill's ideas as implemented by 10 or 15 different teams. And then, Y Combinator and Techstars came out, shortly thereafter. I had been a co-investor with Brad Fells of Techstars co-founder, for 10 or 15 years before that, when I was living in Cambridge in Massachusetts, starting one of my internet company where we coined the term cloud computing. And Brad and I had co-invested on a number of occasions. So when it came a chance to work with Techstars, I actually became one of the initial funders of Techstars when they expanded from Boulder to Boston and joined up with that. And I really loved that model, more so than the YC model, which is also a very good model, because it actually had a real cohort and a community focus. And I love the fact that you have 10, 15 teams, 30, 40, 50 entrepreneurs working together in a space, learning from each other. And that's that kind of community is what we continue to build around our programs and around our locations globally.
Yeah, amazing. There was just this energy about the place. I remember kind of leaving and thinking, wow, it was just so much active discussion, so much excitement. It was a great place to work.
And it still is. And there's still every day there are people pouring in, VCs coming in, Fortune 100 companies coming in, Fortune 500 companies coming in, looking at what these companies are doing every day. It's a vibrant hub of activity. And you've got these, as I say, tens of millions of dollars worth of money has gone into building these locations. And so we've got these spectroscopy labs, and we've got these chemistry labs, walk-in hoods for the chemistry side, of course, like standard advanced 3D printing technologies, but also, metalworking machines and welders and whatever you need to do to work with plastics and metalwork and assembly lines and things like that.
Yeah, awesome. Just a couple of things with some of your labs around the world. When I think about San Francisco, that's the only one I visited, and that ecosystem. How different are entrepreneurs? What are the differences in entrepreneurs in some of the different kind of geographies, as it were? Are there any stark geographical?
Sure. I think the reason that a lot of the entrepreneurs that we back come to the United States and come to, New York or San Francisco, which are our primary locations, New York being the IndieBio New York and HAX, and San Francisco for IndieBio San Francisco. The reason they come is because they want to be part of what they idealize as these rapid moving places. But I mean, to be honest, we're not drawing from a local audience. And, when we're drawing from California, we have the program in California, and certainly maybe 20% of the teams come from, some part of California, maybe less, sometimes more. But in general, they're coming from outside the United States. And so they are, probably 60% are coming from outside the United States, which you'd expect. 95% of the population in the world is from outside the United States. So why would you cut off 95% of the population? So we're looking for the brightest minds anywhere. Some of them come out of, the standard institutions, École Polytechnique or Waterloo, in Canada, or Stanford or MIT or, Carnegie Mellon or RPI or things like that. But we're looking everywhere. And so we just, they come from Korea, they come from Japan, they come from everywhere, India. And so, we're happy to, say that the founders themselves, they are looking for the entrepreneurial sort of the vibe that exists everywhere, but, certainly has more access to capital and more access to corporations and more access to like-minded people, where you have hubs of entrepreneurship happening. And in the United States, the two biggest hubs are San Francisco and New York. And that's one of the reasons why we've put ourselves down in these locations, is because of the large access to those talented engineers and scientists that have sort of more entrepreneurial tendencies. It's even more true in San Francisco than it is in New York. And of course, there's many other very great ecosystems elsewhere. And we attract the companies that come here to be together, to learn from each other, to learn from the best in the world, and to learn from our staff and to use our facilities and to get access to the, for every $100 million we invest in a year, we get about $2 billion of follow-on capital that comes into our companies every year. The companies that came through IndieBio and HAX. And so that is something that we give them access to. We give them the seal of approval. We say, well, I mean, not everyone. And and we'll write off an investment quickly, even if it's $500,000, initial capital that we give to a company, we'll write it off if the science just doesn't work, or, it's a good try or whatever. Or if the team is dishonest, which, hopefully we've screened that out in almost all cases. But if it does happen that somebody is misrepresenting what they're doing, then we have to cut it off and write off that investment immediately. We're not going to, try to push out to the industry and our dear network of follow-on investors, a deal which is going to screw them, because it will end up, that they won't work with us again. So, our part of our main role is to be the supply chain for the rest of the deep tech VCs that are operating at a later stage, like at the seed stage or Series A stage or Series B stage. And so sometimes our companies come in, they skip the seed round, they go straight to a Series A, and sometimes, they just have to, they come in, they'll work for 3 or 4 years, get the science better, get the yields up, get the product market fit, and then they'll get their seed round. So there's a wide range of deals, but for us, we're looking just for the kind of big ideas that could be long shots, but that are really important that the world gets these world-changing solutions.
Yeah, that's great. I think you mentioned when we first spoke, something like venture returns being something like over the last few years being down around 80% or something over the last, I think 3 and a bit years or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to say down or 80%, it's actually down more than that, right? So it's because, it used to be venture would be up every year. And for the last 3 years, the net IRRs are negative, right? For most firms. Now, we've done a little bit better than the average firms. We've actually been climbing up the ranks relative to our compatriots. But that's, I think, because the areas that we're investing in. So we never were a really big investor in SaaS. That's not us. We do like more hardware as a service or, climate tech. And those areas are more resilient. And even so, those areas have seen decreases in capital. There's probably something like 70 or 80% fewer deals being done versus 3 years ago, and that is really hurting. And you can look at the charts; it's quite obvious. The entire industry. I think the only area that's unaffected is generative AI, which sort of came up in the last year and a half or 2 years as being a super hot area, and so that area is exploding. Whereas the rest of the VC industry is contracting, even in the hot areas like climate tech. So it is becoming harder, and that was because there was an explosion of VC firms and capital that really peaked in 2021, and at the end of 2021, first quarter of 2022, it's been tougher since then.
Yeah, no, got it. And does that you spoke about like investing in the next great ideas, right? Innovation that can really change humanity.
Yeah.
Does it become more difficult to continue investing with such a long timeline for the future with returns being under pressure so much?
Yeah. So like for us, we're okay. I do know that it's difficult for people that have more concentrated portfolios. If you only have like 10 or 20 investments in your portfolio, you're not going to hit an exceptional, the odds of hitting an exceptional, big bump are lower. So we have 650 companies in our portfolio. So it's about 30 times as many in one 4-year fund. And so we will, we always have the benefit of some of those outliers driving DPI. So, and so we're ahead of the curve of the rest of the VC industry. But, because enough of those outliers make enough of a difference that we not only get higher IRR, but we also get a higher DPI. So that helps us. But I do recognize in general that this is a very long-term, investment. The benefit, even though it's longer term, you do see the TVPI, mounting as these companies come, get the pilots done with these big, big implementations for Fortune 100 companies or whatever, or for governments. But if you look at the actual, DPI, these are longer term companies to come to actually DPI, of course, meaning distributions of overpaid in capital, TVPI meaning total value overpaid in. So the cash on cash realization of an exit is the DPI. The multiple on invested cash is when some other VC comes along and says you invested at a time when the company was, say, 10 million and now it's worth 150 million. You see a big appreciation in the difference. And of course, many of your companies fail, and that's at our stage, eventually 60% of our companies fail. If you are a regular VC, that's probably pretty similar to what you see, 60% of companies failing. But in deep tech, they fail much. When they do fail, they'll actually survive a lot longer. And actually, there is also a chance that they don't fail quite as frequently as software companies do. So that's counterintuitive, because everybody thinks that, oh wow, deep tech, that must cost a lot of money, and it does, but nowhere near as much as software costs. I mean, have you looked at the price of software engineers? Like, it's freaking nuts. So you can actually do a lot more as a deep tech company sometimes, even though you're less reliant on software. Everybody has software in their systems, whether you're a hardware system or a biotech system. There's always AI or something that plays a factor, but it's less dependent on some of those more expensive software things, and more dependent on the scientific discovery. Yeah.
Tell me, where do we go from here, though? Where's the crystal ball kind of pointing you think?
Well, so the themes that are probably bigger right now, we have a lot of companies working on energy and industrial independence, so manufacturing technologies that help change our means of production. And I mention this because about 2/3 of our investment is in those areas, and that's climate focused. Like when we produce our food using feedlot animals and things like that, what we're seeing is that there's huge greenhouse gas generation that happens because of that way. And when we produce our textiles in the way we're producing them now, there's huge levels of greenhouse gas because of all the waste that's generated along the way, et cetera. So we have to actually rethink how we're manufacturing these technologies. And then those are areas that we do a lot in both IndieBio and HAX. So reinventing our means of production. Every human being on the planet consumes about 25,000 pounds of processed product per year. And I know you may think, geez, it's like 100 times your body weight or 200 times your body weight or something. And so you're thinking, how could I possibly consume that much? Well, it's not just the food that you eat, it's the textiles that you wear, and it's the fuel. Just the fuel by itself is 300, 500 times what your body weight is. It's like 7,000, 8,000 pounds of fuel for most people to keep your house warm or to drive your car, those kinds of things. And so like when you're consuming all that much, you have to be thinking about, how do we change that? Because the ways that we're producing that 25,000 pounds, I don't have an issue with people consuming 25,000 pounds of manufactured or processed product, but I do have a problem with them doing it the way that we do it now, because the greenhouse gas generation that's involved in the ways and means of production that we have right now are very wasteful. And we would have had to stop at 2.5 billion population on the planet in order to not have global warming happening. And we didn't. I was born
about 8 billion or something there.
We're 8 billion last year. So when I was born, the year I was born, 1964, 60 years ago, I'm not 60. It was 3 billion. That was the year we hit 3 billion. And last year was the year we hit 8 billion. And we'll hit 10 billion. So all we have to do is, have the abundant lives that we have now, waste, what we waste now, but at least manufacture in a way where there is minimal greenhouse gas generation. And if we do that, and it's totally possible to do that using biology and other techniques to improve the main ways we used to produce these things, was using chemistry, and chemistry in the 1900s, it enabled the sort of wealthy society we have right now. But using biology can be 30 times more efficient, meaning we can have theoretically 30 times as many people, right, on the planet. Instead of 2.5 billion, we could have 75 billion. That's never going to happen, hopefully, in the next 500 years. But we could theoretically be that efficient. And so we are working on just making it good enough for the 8 billion and the 10 billion. And so there's a lot of reinvention that needs to be done, continuous reinvention. And in the field of electrical production, that's one of the areas that we're working a lot at on HAX. It's like things like the electrification issues, being able to mine copper in ways that don't require smelting. And therefore not having to, when you do mine copper in the United States, send it to China where it gets smelted because they don't have the environmental regulations. All the greenhouse gases pour into the air, and then they ship it the copper back to the United States. All this inefficient shipping and whatnot, and all to pretend that we're following environmental regulations when we're just, all those greenhouse gases are being emitted, all that toxic pollution is being brought into the air, whether it's happening in China or if it's happening in the United States or Chile or wherever the copper is being produced. So we have to think very clearly about how to reinvent our means of production for our minerals and our rare minerals and all of that. And we have bunches of teams that are working on battery technologies, copper technologies, using hydrogen as a renewable fuel source, means of transportation of that, means of, more efficient engines, et cetera. We have a lot of great companies working on all those technologies in those fields, as well as the human health fields that we mentioned before, where we have transformative therapies for autoimmune diseases. And there's like 80 autoimmune diseases that everybody knows, like diabetes and other autoimmune diseases. And there's also there's also cancers and all these other therapies that we have many teams working on. And we're super excited to be doing the work we're doing. I mean, it's really joyful for me to be able to have access to all some of the world's most brilliant minds. It's the funnest job that you could possibly have, is to work with all these people. I'm constantly learning from the very best in the world, the people who are able to get into our programs. And I can tell you the future can be amazingly great, despite whatever other things are going on in the world. I know there's a lot of shit happening in the world. There's wars going on. There's a contentious political election in the United States, and in many other countries, you're seeing these autocratic, dictatorship style rulers that are coming in. But still, the science is advancing, and engineering is advancing, and eventually, people are going to wise up, and we'll fly the ship right, I think.
Amazing. Just thinking about the market and where we are now, right? You mentioned about some of the excesses, in 21, and, there was so much hype in the space. When you now think about the future and you think about all this critical stuff, what do we need to do to learn the lessons, on the, not the boom bust, but the ups and downs of VC, for instance? How do we ride those storms better?
Yeah, well, I will say that it's very predictable. Whenever you see a large opening of IPOs in the market, a year and a half after that, you see the start of a big boom in venture capital, as that DPI translates into the high returns being realized for people who are investing in venture capital funds. And then they start pouring more money back into venture capital funds. And as a result, you also see a lot of more venture capital funds being created. Now, I think this is the worst period in venture capital in the last 20 years. This is much worse than the 2008, 2010 sort of Great Recession. This is going all the way back to the dot-com crisis in the early 2000s. And the reason I say that is just the prolonged period is longer than any other period, and the level of investment happening as a fraction of the economy is a really, really low level. We're seeing the complete bottoming out of the sort of the friends and family angel investor community. They're completely wiped out. There's very little activity happening there. And then you have a lot of seed funds, a smaller number of Series A and Series B funds. And so what you saw is the 2,500 VCs from probably 6-8 years ago grow to about 8,000 to 10,000 VCs across the world, including all these corporate VCs that all came in. And some of that is sort of very touristy. and some of it is strategic. But at any rate, there's this growth of 4 times as many VCs competing for deals, and that made things a little frothy. The zero interest rate period, made things pretty frothy, and for whatever reason, COVID made things a bit frothy. So we had this, really, really, really super hyperactive period. When the exits come again, I can tell you in large numbers, you're going to also see a year and a half after that, you're going to see a big boom and an over boom. But what's going to happen in between now and then is that 10,000 VCs is going to drop down to more like 3,000 VCs. Normally, there was a record number of first-time funds that were created. Normally, first-time funds only have a 40% chance of becoming a second-time fund anyway. So 60% of first-time funds never raise a second fund, just to be clear. So there's thousands that are going to drop off just because of that. But I think the kill zone right now is not going to be 60% drop off. I think it's going to be like 80, 90% of those first-time funds will be unable to raise a second fund because of the poor period. This was not a period where a rising tide lifted all boats. This is a period where you had to be extraordinarily, good or lucky to see a rising boat. The whole industry was down 20% in 2020, 15, 16% or something like that in 23, and down again in 24, maybe a little bit less down, but still down, probably 10% or more. So this is like you compound those losses, and that's, even the best managers are having some losses. Maybe that's happening mostly on some of the smaller managers or the first-time managers, but even the best managers are seeing really big problems there. So we feel very lucky because we've just basically skated sideways for the last 3 years, and it's not because we're not seeing write-downs. It's just that we're seeing a similar number of write-ups versus our write-downs. But we're at a record number of companies having priced rounds which are down, and a record number of companies that are not even having priced rounds where they're convertible loan notes. I'm not sure who your audience is, so a little bit here, so I don't know if I'm speaking over everyone's head on this or if this is appropriate, but you feel free to.
No, it's very appropriate. Very appropriate. So, in fact, the audience is mainly, a lot of kind of CEOs and entrepreneurs and, I suppose senior people within the space, as it were. I mean, it's interesting. Just tell me, just to finish off with, how do you feel about the future? I mean, you've created an awful lot, right? You've really lived out, your dreams here in terms of kind of impact and doing the things you love doing. You mentioned you're 60 years now, as it were. How do you view the future for yourself over the next 5 years, 10 years or so?
Well, I think SOSV has a tremendous base to continue to grow from. We've just added one GP. We're going to add another GP very shortly. We've also spun out some of our previous, operations into completely new venture capital firms. So we had our programs in Asia that were more focused less on deep tech and in the developing markets on e-commerce and fintech and things like that. And that spun out as a fund called Orbit Startups. And then we also had a crypto blockchain. It was really blockchain at first, but there were some tokens in it. And that also very successful fund. We spun that out as a separately operated fund with two GPs. So some of our partners have gone on and with SOSV's blessing and with our backing, they've created separate individual funds. I think we are right now with our deep tech focus completely 100% focused on the science and engineering that we think is most critical for the advancement of these areas that we care deeply about human health and planetary health. So I think we're going to continue working on these areas. And by planetary health, we're incorporating all the industrial independence and all of the sort of things that make for more local production. So we think that's a healthier thing for societies and for economies around the world to be, independent, with having local production of what they need. Independent of overly long supply chains and sometimes unreliable trading partners. So those are things that we think are healthier for the world's development as well.
Yeah.
Sort of socio-politically and all of that. So, where does it go from here? Like, we're going to just keep doing what we're doing. There's a great quote from, I think it was Robert Oppenheimer. I got the first name wrong, perhaps, but grow happiness underneath your feet rather than off in the distance. And I think when you have a process that's working well, and when you have a team that loves doing what they do day after day and can keep doing it day after day for the years to come, that's much better than sort of saying, okay, yeah, I mean, it's always useful to say, okay, in 5 years we'll have 5 billion in assets under management, and we probably will, and we have that goal, and we have sort of internal goals in terms of 5x, DPI for our funds, and top, quartile performance, for all of our funds, et cetera. But those are sort of the things that keep us in business. I think the things that keep us actively enthused about the work that we do are not just hitting the financial targets at all, but really just, working with these, most critical problems for society and for humanity and for our economies, and delighting in the weirdness of all the fantastic things that science can bring us.
Wow.
It's just amazing. I mean, we're just backing right now a company, and we've done a lot across the food space, but we're just backing now a company. I won't say exactly what the company does, but it transforms a type of food production in traditional industries dramatically, and completely changes the profile of the greenhouse gas emissions, while also providing for much increased productivity of the production of these food products, healthier food products, less inputs required, and also, shuts down the greenhouse gas production that, dramatically of the production of these things. So, we're continuing to work on all these new industries. It's the most exciting work you could possibly do. I love what we do. I think our team loves what we do, and we're just going to keep.
Awesome. Well, listen, Sean, I could talk to you all day about this, but I know you've got a lot to be getting on with. And listen, thanks so much. It's a real privilege to have you on and to discuss your journey, your inspiring journey, and your, the support that SOSV is really helping shape this future of innovation. So thanks for sharing your insights.
We're only a piece of the journey. We're the beginning of the journey for so many of our founders. We rely and we're entirely dependent on the rest of the VC industry, because, as I said, they put in 20 times as much capital as we do into these companies at those later stages, at those Series B, Series C, and beyond stages. So we have to be very collaborative with seed investors, Series A investors, and beyond. And so, it's great to be part of an industry that's making such a difference.
Absolutely. And listen, I wish you all the very best, Sean, and just thanks so much for your time and coming on. Really enjoyed the conversation today.
Thank you. Really enjoyed chatting with you.
All right. Listen, all the best. Yeah. Take care. So I hope this conversation left you with valuable takeaways to navigate your own path, whether you're building a startup or thinking about the next big idea. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for more stories of innovation and leadership.